on here? All indications are green. All right, Madam Chair, we are live. If you need any help with anything, let me know.
Okay, we're going to call the Parks and Recreation Committee to order on January 27th at 6 p.m. Let me just see, I think we need somebody to help me with the attendance as to take our roll call. Is someone able to help me? Justin, can you help me with that?
I can do that.
Or Rhonda? Rhonda's volunteered.
Andrea Voorhees.
You're muted.
Andrea, you're muted.
Sorry.
Kathleen Asseltine.
Here.
Mary Carlock.
Point
Here.
of order. We need to announce our location.
Oh,
Oops.
yeah, we forgot.
Oops.
Andrea Voorhees.
Present, White Lake, Michigan, White Lake Township.
Kathleen Asseltine.
Present, White Lake, Michigan.
Mary Carlock.
Present, White Lake, Michigan.
Deb Darren.
White Lake, Michigan.
CJ Bratta.
Here, White Lake.
Rhonda Grubb. Here, White Lake, Michigan.
Okay, now we will do the Pledge of Allegiance if we can have a flag present. And I know there's a sound delay that kind of makes it difficult, but we'll do our best. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
which is
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. It always throws me off when the timing's all over the place. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or modifications to the agenda? We have a motion to approve the agenda
Motion to approve.
from Kathleen. Second
I'll support it.
from CJ. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And we also
Actually,
have,
don't we need to do a roll call vote for that one too, you guys? Sorry.
well, I was at a different meeting and the township attorney said for matters of more
Substance.
critical substance.
Okay, you're good.
So I decided,
I guess I forget that. You're good. Thank you. Sorry.
but we can do it if you'd like.
No, we're good.
Also, we've already gotten the minutes from our January 13th meeting that were emailed to us by Justin. Have there been any changes, corrections, clarifications for those minutes? Okay, is there anyone that would like to pass a motion or make a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, Rhonda, and a second.
I'll support.
Was that Deb or Kathleen?
It can be Deb.
Deb, you agree?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
all
you.
in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next item is the call to the public. So I just want to mention that I think it's, we might have some people in their waiting room, but if people are just also listening, we are preparing to do a grant application, and there'll actually be a formal public hearing probably at a township board meeting before that resolution is passed. So you'll have other opportunities. I know you haven't seen the presentations tonight, but if there's any, are there any people in the waiting room who would like to speak now?
There are no callers in the waiting room at this time, Madam Chair. It does look like, as you mentioned, there are several people watching the YouTube channel, but no one in this meeting at this point.
Was called in. Okay, so just to let people know that there will be a public hearing probably later in March or February before an application would go into the state. So we're going to go on to new business. Justin, I think there was a maybe some other, before we do the Beckett Raider one, that maybe Mike and Liz might have a presentation that they would like to show us.
No, we don't have anything to present.
Okay.
Thank you, Marie.
Oh, okay. Obviously, you know, ultimately this is, we're a recommending board and this is a board decision. So we'll move through the process and I guess we'll, oh yes, Liz.
If I may, just so all board members are aware of the process, we weren't included in your attendance roll call, but we are able to be voting members this evening. So I
Oh,
just,
okay, yeah, because
just so the Parks and
my-
Rec
the
Committee are
supervisor.
aware of that.
yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, I guess we're on to Beckett Rader's presentation. We had a lot of moving parts last time, so we'll see what we can hopefully agree upon. And it's also, we are trying to really refine. There's a lot of things that you can do on a plan that is the big plan for the master plan, and that is conceptual and can change over time. We really need to hone in on what we can afford to build now with a grant and what would be part of that request. That doesn't mean that other things, that the concept as a whole can change over time, but we have to decide the bare minimum to get the park, open, and with what monies we have available and through a grant. With that, I'll turn it over to Brian and Justin to show us where we're at today. Thank you.
I guess I'll just mention real quick before Brian gets going. I know he and Caitlin have been working hard over the last 2 weeks to address a lot of the or address some of the comments from the last meeting, just to set the table of where we're at timeline. The application for the grant is April 1st. So if we do not have a recommendation tonight to move forward, then there won't be a grant application. So that's just where we're at. That's the timeline. So I believe that there's support for getting to a grant application. So that means that we'll have to take some type of action tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Parks Committee. We're happy to be here again with you this evening and have some updates to share with you since our last meeting 2 weeks ago. Can everybody see my screen okay? Okay, great. Thank you. So tonight we'll recap the last meeting discussion a little bit. We'll go through some of the concept revisions that we've made over the last 2 weeks, and then we'll review some cost options for a first phase, for an initial phase of construction and grant application. So this is the master plan that you saw last time. We talked at length about the roadway configuration and amphitheater configuration on the north. You'll see some adjustments to that in the new concept. We talked about, actually, I'm going to go ahead and flip. Go ahead and flip and talk a little bit about our discussion last time. As I mentioned, we talked about reorienting the drive on the north end, along with the amphitheater, moving the lower park drop-off closer to the waterfront for better access. There's a desire to add some recreational elements and amenities to the park, including pickleball, basketball, a splash pad, and exercise stations. We had a little bit of discussion about a dog park, and we were evaluating opportunities for additional cost savings, reduction of pavements, reduction of shelters, and the restrooms. And taking another look at restrooms. We also, I skipped over it up here, but we also talked about revising the concept to save the existing block building for future renovation. So you'll see that in the revised concept. And then we took another look at breaking the menu of options up into a first phase, recognizing that access to the water is number one priority. So in a new concept, we'll get into some enlargements here in a moment. We did revise the north entryway to be consistent with the Civic Center master plan. The amphitheater changed orientation a little bit to allow for road geometry and maintenance of the existing block structure. We've added some recreation amenities, pickleball, basketball, and a splash pad. The northern wetland trail loops have been simplified. The parking and drop-off has slid closer to the waterfront. We separated the shelter and the restroom, so those are two different structures at this point. Exercise stations have been added along the pedestrian pathways. We added notes about fence around the playground. And for cost savings, we've looked at gravel drives and parking rather than porous bituminous. The area, actually, I'm going to go ahead and flip to an enlargement here. The area on the north here, where we're dealing with quite a bit of slope, those areas of roadway would continue to be standard asphalt. And then once we get into the lower portion of the park where the grades are flatter and we're not dealing with erosive water forces as much, then it would the roads and the parking would transition to gravel. So here you can see how the roadway parallels the future public safety building and comes straight down and connects into the Civic Center plan. This configuration matches that on the Civic Center master plan. The road then swings out around the existing block building with an opportunity for vehicular access to a storage area on one side of the building, and then a pedestrian path and outdoor plaza area on the other end of the building, which might house restrooms or other user amenities. The amphitheater has shifted a little bit and reduced in size a little bit to accommodate those revisions, but we're still able to maintain a safe distance from the large mature trees that border this wetland. So I think those are some win-win revisions. We've also shown a gate at this location so that the park can be closed off to vehicular traffic during off hours. And it's a little hard to see here. But in yellow, we've shown some striping for basketball in this parking lot so that during most days, the parking can be restricted to one side of the lot and then this area used for basketball. Then during larger events, the entire lot could be used for parking as needed.
Cool.
Moving down to the middle portion, you can see, oops, that's curious. The transition to gravel apparently happens right where we decided to cut the image off. So this portion of roadway would be gravel and gravel parking, except for the barrier-free spaces, which would be concrete for accessibility. Associated with the roadway are the vehicular control bollards. And we'll talk a little bit more about those when we get into the cost estimate. And then we have some vegetated swales and bioswales so that we can deal with stormwater and water quality control. Bituminous pathway with a shelter and 2 pickleball courts in this location. And then we're also showing benches and exercise stations along this primary pathway, and interpretive signage as well. Moving down to the core area of the park, this configuration is very similar to what you saw before, except for the roadway and the parking areas are now gravel, with the exception of the barrier-free spaces within each lot that are concrete for accessibility. And then the drop-off loop itself is also shown in bituminous for accessibility and for ease of maintenance. This drop-off circle has pushed previously, in the previous concept, it was about right where my cursor is. So we've pushed that closer to the passageway to the waterfront. The distance between the drop-off and the overlook pier is approximately 300 feet. And you'll see here the central pavilion. We separated a restroom facility, which is shown in this location right here, so that it's in relatively close proximity to the core amenities, but also close to the drop-off loop for ease of regular maintenance. We're continuing to show the playground here in the core area with a fence. And then we've shown a splash pad adjacent to this picnic shelter, which is also in close proximity to the restroom for convenience. The waterfront activities remain the same as they were previously, with a shelter, an accessible canoe and kayak launch, the overlook pier, and beach. As I mentioned earlier, the north pathway loop has been simplified. So it's a continuous loop with a potential future connection through to the Civic Center property. The southern loops remain, and for cost efficiencies, especially for the boardwalk, we've looked at reducing the width of those to 8 feet. So those are the revisions that we've made based on the comments last time. And we also talked last week a little bit about phasing priorities and funding. The highest priorities that we heard were for waterfront access in the first phase and accessible roads and parking in the first phase. As we're building the phasing for our grant application, we're looking at what are the fundable elements, how those elements impact potential application scoring. We're looking at the overall quality of the design of how those elements and those activities logically assemble together. Do they make sense, or are we just creating a bunch of diverse activities that don't really relate to each other in order to conform to a budget? Obviously, we're wanting to assemble those in a logical way so that we have a real usable park. We talked about targeting an approximate $1 million budget. And with those goals, we've taken another look at cost estimates and started to put together a few options for you for a first phase. So looking at a menu of options, again, we've divided things up, added a few new elements in here based on our comments and discussion at the last meeting. We've also notated a few items that are probably longer range and just simply notated those as future. And that results in about a $2.6 million hard cost with a little under $600,000 soft cost for a total park project budget of $3.25 million. Now for first phase, we've assembled 4 options for you, moving from the most expensive to the least expensive. In this first option, we would be looking at installing the roadway all the way down to and including the drop-off circle. And then also including the overlook pier at the lake shore. And then the connecting pathway, connecting pedestrian pathway from the overlook all the way up through the park to the beginning of the roadway network where sidewalks would connect back up to the to Strawberry Lake Road. I'm sorry, not Strawberry Lake Road. That's where I live.
That's right.
Elizabeth Lake Road. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, mental slip there. And then also connecting back into the future Civic Center development. So all of that totals approximately 1.2 million total project costs. And I should also mention that these numbers assume a shared expense of this first, basically this first leg of the entry drive, that the cost for that leg would be shared equally between the park project and the Civic Center project. As a second option, it is essentially the exact same option, except that we would not install vehicular control bollards along the roadway. I mentioned those briefly earlier as we were going through the concept plan, and that is something that maybe could be done without for right now. And then if there's a need at a later date, they could be pretty easily installed at that time. So simply removing those from the previous option brings us down to a little over $1 million, about $1,070,000 total project cost. For a third option, we would bring the entry road down to this middle parking area, but not extend it all the way down to the drop-off circle. We would still maintain the pedestrian pathway all the way down to the overlook pier and also include that overlook pier itself. The total for that is a little over $900,000 total project cost. And then the fourth option is, again, the same thing, but without the vehicular control bollards. And that brings us down to about $850,000 total project cost. So between those four options, we have a range of around $850,000 on the low side to about $1.2 million on the high side.
I'm sorry, Brian, what was the difference between option C and D?
C includes the vehicular control bollards and D does not include those. And I'm just going to go ahead and flip here. Just to refresh everybody's memory, we talked about trying to install some elements to limit vehicular access onto the grass where we don't want vehicles. Sometimes there's a tendency for people picnicking to want to take their cars all the way to the picnic shelter if we don't intentionally control those. So the bollards that I'm referring to would be something like this along the edge of the roadway where we feel it's needed to control those vehicles. So the options A and B are the same, except for A includes these, B does not. And likewise, options C and D are the same, except for C includes these and D does not. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So those are the revisions and updates and recalculations that have been done since our last meeting. And I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, I guess I'll start just briefly and then we'll go around to everybody. As I say, I can see 4 people besides myself, so after a certain point, I might just have Justin call people, but I think you did a good job of updating it, including some more recreation. Of course, no matter how much we draw on a plan, we can only afford so much. And of course, just like a house, it's kind of where you have to pay for your utilities and your septic fields and some stuff. Maybe the roof is sometimes not as exciting as the swimming pool and things, the other things that you can have. So, but this is like the skeleton, the structure that will hold the park together to get people into the park. And then over time, we can add lots of other amenities. We have this master plan now. Again, each time we apply for a grant, we'll revisit the master plan and because things change, but I do find it good. I'd still, I didn't expect to see the splash pad down here, but I'm fine with a small splash pad, maybe not right under foot of a shelter, but that's fine. I still would like to see some kind of fountain in the civic center that kids can play into with part of a more urban setting up there. I'm a little concerned about dropping the bollards, just knowing how it's been like on our soccer fields before. We had a little more control on the parking lot. I remember having my kids playing soccer and cars driving right through the little kids' practice. I was like, stop. So, and being in Parks and Rec, I've seen people just, if they can take their car anywhere, they're going to take their car anywhere. Of course, the bollards are very nice. There's some people use boulders, some people use ditches, I think, at the state parks more to get people out of large areas. But I guess I would ask Justin, what in conversations with this treasurer and the superintendent, we're still at $1 million. The trust fund grants are only 300,000 this year. So like a trust fund grant, even at 50% match local, is only 600,000. So maybe it's something we could consider the land and water fund, which doesn't have as much competition or both. What kind of feelings do we get? You mentioned some of the dollars last time, so I'll ask what it looks like, this week.
Sure. So just to refresh on the dollars, as Mary mentioned, with the millage collection, the Parks Fund has approximately $575,000 in it. So our annual maintenance costs are for just grounds maintenance are around $40,000 a year. If we save and pinch our pennies, maybe we'll spend 70,000 this year just in our consultant fees and maintenance and some other things that we need to do. With the following year's millage collection, we might have closer to 700,000 that we could put at this. The only general fund contribution would be the 50% that they would match for the roadway along the civic center site. So, $1 million is stretching would be the absolute max that we would be able to go for in a phase.
And I think we still want to, we still want to do, the triangular walkway and we have other things that we might want to do, improvements and maintenance things at our other parks. So I don't, as far as like when you would spend the money, if this grant was recommended in December, then the first year could just be design and engineering, and then you'd go to bid, say late 2022 or 23. So you do have a couple more years of fund collection that would, make it a little less spending everything in the bank kind of thing.
You bring up a good point, Mary, and keep in mind, everyone, that the millage will collect through 2023. You know, there's no guarantee that it would be renewed. So we have those funds, you know, for 3 more years. We're halfway through that collection. As Mary mentioned, we have the Triangle Trail and other pathways that are still a priority of the township. And I think we had talked at the last meeting that we, at a minimum, want to maintain a $200,000 fund balance in the Parks Fund.
Okay. So I'll defer to the township on maybe how much that would go through. And then I'm glad that we were able to fit as much in as we can. I do feel like the basketball should be up near the police station, just because I've been involved with several basketball courts and everybody asks for them, residents ask for them, and then once they're open, then they call and say they must be removed because they're just active areas and they just need a little eyes on the game kind of thing. So I feel better about them being up top where there's more people around to see them and they can play. And I thought that was a good solution. Rhonda, you're next on my stack of people. So.
Okay. I kind of agree with Mary. You know, we can only go as far as with which money we have. I appreciate the drawing. I'm amazed at how creative you guys can be. And it looks like you addressed everything that was brought up at the last meeting, and I appreciate that. You know, ideally, if we could go with option A, that'd be beautiful, but I don't think that's very realistic. And I agree with Mary too, that you have to have those barriers to keep people from driving their cars all over. If we could pull off option C, that would be good. But again, we have to make sure that the first priority is getting at least that pathway done around the Triangle Trail area, and then with what's left. I also like the basketball in the parking lot. That's something I would not have thought of or even to recommend. But you know, I don't imagine that parking lot to be that busy unless there is some kind of a big event going on. So that's a nice option. Liz brought up last time too, if and when we get to the point that we can have a playground down there, that the importance of a fence around the playground. Kids are fast, there's lots of woods, and there's a road that's going to go around it. So a fence is important there. And I think that's all about I have in my notes. Thank you.
Michael, you're actually next on my list here just because of how the computer works, I guess.
Oh, boy, are you sure? Okay. Hey, guys, I'm going to start by complimenting the rec committee, because without you guys, this plan would still be all trees. And I really think you guys did an excellent job putting this together. Man, it's hit my buttons. I think Beckett Rader, I think Brian did a good job backing the costs out of it, and yet it still has the amenities. And even by pulling the pathways out of it, out of the first phase, things like that, a lot of those pathways are beaten into the ground except through the wetland areas there. So you can still visit and get into the nature and out of the more developed areas there. But guys, I don't have. I just think I think it's a home run. We can get people down to the park. Liz will probably have a couple things to say, and we talked a little bit today, but we've taken care of the physically challenged people. As I look at it and knowing how old I'm getting and how much slower I'm getting, we may need to break up that path between the drop off or the handicap spots and the lake with maybe 2 benches. Maybe somebody can only walk 100 feet at a time. But otherwise, gosh, guys, I'm super impressed, and I want to thank you.
Well, flattery will get you everywhere.
I just think this is a home run, guys. I'm excited.
That's great. And I do want to mention that I still want a dog park too. This will also have a place for dogs on, on leashes but I have dreams of a much nicer facility. I'm working on one with the Metro Parks. That's like, wow. So that's something that maybe we can get them to look at, or the county as well. But anyway, Liz, you are next on my stack of people if I skip Brian, who's already spoken.
Okay, thank you. I would normally prefer to go last to be able to hear from the committee first, but I will go now and then
Thank you.
chime in if we need, if Mike and I feel like we missed anything. So I do want to thank Brian for listening well and incorporating many of my suggestions last time and the committee suggestions as well. He did a good job. And I want to thank him for significantly cutting the cost, because if this doesn't come into a reasonable cost area, we're spinning our wheels here, folks. So thank you, Brian, for bringing down the cost, and thank you for listening and putting in so many amenities that we all talked about last meeting. A couple of things that come to mind that went through the presentation is I want to start out by saying that we're here now, so we're not going to go backwards. But last meeting, it was astonishing that there was some Parks and Recs members that perhaps didn't understand the process or didn't understand the vision for this area. I think we are all on the same page now moving forward. So I'm not going to go backwards, we're going to go forward. And so we have plugged in much of what we have hoped for. So I want to start out by saying, though, if there's not a draw and there's not amenities to this park, it's an excitement right out the gate. We aren't going to be able to generate and keep up that excitement to add on to phase 2 and 3. So I'm very pleased to see getting to the water, amenities, things to do, recreation, things that in phase 1 that are going to immediately be appeasing and desirable to our residents. So I want to thank you for that. I apologize to Brian that some course correction was necessary last meeting, but course correction is necessary for us to be able to hit our April 1st deadline. I do want to thank you for the fence. Not only is it a large park, but there's water in this park, and that is a scary thing to parents with young children. So I definitely want to thank you for the fence. Trustee Powell and I did speak about benches along the 300-foot walking path from the drop-off area. Thank you again for moving that closer. So we would like to see, and I think I see one. It's small, Brian. I think I see one there, but I definitely would like to see 2 at minimum. There are residents that absolutely cannot walk 300 feet. So I really started to think about this after our last meeting. Mary is very passionate about having the accessible kayak and canoe launch. Well, let's think that through, folks. You're going to drop off somebody at this circular area, and then they're going to be expected to drag their kayak, or they need that accessibility. They need that handicap accessible kayak launch. Somehow they're supposed to drag their kayak 300 feet to get to that accessible kayak launch. That doesn't match up in my mind. So I'm still going to later in my conversation here talk to you about accessibility in that 300 feet stretch across that wetland path. So thank you for cutting costs. Again, that makes this doable and move forward, and it allows us to meet our grant deadline. I had a good conversation with Fire Marshal Holland today, and I'm pleased to see, I believe that there is appropriate turn radius where they can get in emergency vehicles. Emergency vehicles must get down to the playground area. They must be able to get to the water, and need be, I believe, an EMS truck could pass and cross that wetlands walking path. It is filled to a point, and so in an emergency, we have people now in the water that we as a township are liable for. So we must be able to, again, cross that path. I'll come back to that. I know that we can be really interesting and creative in costs. And if we started this, if I had joined you months ago, I would have suggested taking field trips to other parks and encompassing ideas a little bit from here and a little bit from there, because that's what really generates that spark of excitement and really hones in on creating a very unique park. But there's things we could do right away to cut costs. There's a program through the Michigan prison system in Marquette where they make posts for parks. So, you know, maybe we can cut those Ballard posts and we can explore that option. Or we can explore a prefab picnic shelter that's a fraction of the cost of these picnic shelters just to get us started. That is a cost that makes us park friendly, user friendly, and it allows us to have picnic shelters and it allows us to cut costs where we're able. The amphitheater at 240 is not a huge cut. We were at 300 before, and everybody in the public listing, please keep in mind that's not part of the grant process. And I will be, I hope my board members will join me when it comes to our stage, that we will be looking for perhaps sponsorship or very creative ways to build the amphitheater, or perhaps when we engage in development in the Civic Center, we can be creative to build that amphitheater. So that doesn't worry me at all. The basketball court in the parking lot is very creative, Ryan. I'm not sure I like it up top. I agree that it needs to be up top. If we can go back to that slide at the top, if you don't mind. Thank you. So this is creative, but we still have green area to in between the Civic Center roadway. It's not the Civic Center roadway, the entrance next to the Civic. Yep, right there, circling. If that's possible, I think I'd like to see the courts there and not near ours. I think that makes more sense to tuck in. Although I commend you for your creative multi-use space there in the parking lot. I'm not totally objectionary to it, but I just think that it makes a little bit more sense to have a basketball court where there's a lot of activity, not close to a parking lot. You have kids chasing after a ball. You have, cars that potentially could be hit with windows and damage and whatnot. So I think it's just overall a little bit better idea to have those courts in that green area that you were circling. The splash.
Yeah, if I may, just a reminder that there's approximately 20 foot difference in vertical grade between the corner of this parking lot and this lower roadway.
Okay.
So this is a very significant slope.
Okay, thank you for reminding me of that. So that makes that.
And there's a flood hill too there, right? Is that still on here? Or?
I'm sorry, Mary.
I'm sorry, Mary, I didn't hear you.
It does, Mary, the sled hill. I think it's noted on there. Yep.
Yeah, it wasn't mentioned, but there's like a little kid sled hill taking advantage of that when you close the gate.
Yeah, we talked about that last week. I remember now that would be fun to have a sled area. Okay, so I'm just throwing ideas out there. So I'm glad to see recreation added. This is significant recreation added from where we were last meeting. So I'm pleased with that. The splash pad, I kind of agree with Mary. It's fun. It's not necessary that it's in this park. It is a possibility that it could be smaller and just little blips of fun splash pads for kids to run through in the Civic Center development. So that's something, I know it's listed as a future cost, but it is something that we as a group could talk about taking out completely of this park or leaving it in, but that doesn't have to be decided at this moment. If I don't see any bathrooms at the beach area or like any ability for I know that's there, but that's got to be 400 or 500 feet. So I think we're going to have some form of bathroom or at least a porta potty on the waterfront. That's quite a ways for a senior citizen or a little one to go when they need to go. I have, again, the concern of, we have these great ideas tooling around of Moby mats and handicap accessible kayak launches and making that waterfront handicap accessible, but we're actually not having any way for a handicapped person to get to it. So we need to have a bare minimum, those sidewalks, I believe, Mr. Powell, correct me if I'm wrong, 14 feet wide. To get to be ADA compliance. And then I am still going to be a really strong advocate to cross that with a road. I know that is not necessary to commit into our phase 1 grant process right now, but I'm going to continue to be a strong advocate right until the end, that waterfront is absolutely handicap accessible to, and not only handicap accessible, but accessible to all residents. Sometimes physical disabilities aren't always seen. Perhaps it's a heart condition or something, and somebody literally cannot walk that far. And so we need to be very conscientious of that and work really hard to make that a goal, to cross that. And they've been crossing it. So here's the thing, folks. They have been crossing it, so it's crossable. So I don't think, and I don't think it will be as expensive as perhaps once thought that it might be, because it's been being crossed for the last 20 years. So I mentioned prefab picnic shelters to cut costs, and what else? Let me just look over my notes, see if I'm missing anything. Oh, this is the one thing I'd like to really share with you. So after our meeting, I really started to think about the dog park. I brought forth the voice of residents that that's my job to do. And we hear all the time that they want a dog park. So I like to be an outside of the box thinker. I like to be creative. I've talked to Justin about this, and I talked to Mr. Powell, Trustee Powell, about this. And I believe that we can create perhaps not the typical dog park that everybody has floating in their mind. That's 5 acres, square, fenced off, and we can do other things. Realistically, we are going to have neighbors living in the civic center, neighbors to this park that don't have a yard. So whether we like it, dogs are coming to this park, folks. So we should make some rules and guidelines and make some dog amenities for when they come. That's so much smarter than having no rules and no dog areas and running the risk of people taking their dogs off leash because this is a large park and they think that, that would be fun and safe to do. So what I'd like to suggest, I don't see it plugged in here, and Brian, you can work with me on where it can be plugged in. My suggestion would be that we fence off small areas. It could be a narrow run where you can throw a frisbee or a ball and run with your dog off leash, or it could be square, the size of a backyard, a 1/4 acre. I'm not talking about a large dog park, but I'm talking about providing our residents with an area that they can safely take their dog off leash. And there be rules, and it's not perhaps, and I'm going to just brainstorm, and this can all be worked out later, but just let me get you where I'm envisioning here. So perhaps there's a rule that, it's one family at a time, and be courteous to your neighbor, and you get 20 minutes or a half hour in the off leash area, or perhaps you only allow, 2 dog families in at a time, or whatever we think is safe later down the road. So that there is a safe, friendly dog amenity, maybe not a dog park that we all think about, but a dog amenity that they can come off leash. And then throughout the trails or throughout the park, we make some maybe fun dog amenities and agility points. Like, maybe there's a cement ramp that they go up and down, or some kind of tunnel that the dog can go through on leash, which simultaneously I believe would be enjoyed by children as well, walking down a trail. So we have to be really realistic that our residents want a dog park. Our township is not going to buy any property in the near future, and we have the capability to make this a dog-friendly area. We have the capability to make the dog amenities that are safe because dogs are going to come to this park anyways. And in that fenced-in area, which the fence doesn't cost that much, we could, have some agility points as simple as line striping or something where you can, throw a ball, the dog comes back, you do a little training or fun with your dog. I'd like to see it tucked way into the park, as far into the park as possible for several reasons. It's not safe to have dogs up by the road. For traffic, it's not, the best dog can be scared by noises. We will have sirens with fire and police up at the top. We will have visitors to this park that perhaps are afraid of dogs, and that's not the first thing they should be welcomed into the park is dogs. So for the dogs and people's safety, I'd like to see it tucked into a nook in a quiet place far away from the road if possible. So Brian, if you have any ideas of somewhere that you can think of that would be a 1/4 acre or a longer narrow run. So that's what I'm proposing to. I think that's a great compromise. I think then I'm doing my job and bringing forth what residents want and they want a dog park, and we're making a fair compromise by giving them dog-friendly amenities within this park. That's all I have for now. I want to listen to what everyone else has on the committee, and then if I circle back around with anything else, but thank you.
Okay, thank you, Liz. And I'll go with maybe Deb.
That was a great presentation. Thanks, Brian. I think I also agree wholeheartedly with Mary and Rhonda in getting the area up by Bogey Lake Road in and along the new Civic Center area road. I think the pathway is great getting to the beach. I think you've hit it pretty close. I mean, very close for money wise. I am also listening to a lot of township people. I have been on this committee for well over 20 years and in this neighborhood, and I have helped pass 2 of the millages. And what I am hearing is, yes, we want to get parks developed to a point, but we also need the money for the pathways to get to the parks as well. So I really appreciate the committee holding money and not spending it all for future events, and to put this into phases as well. So I also agree with the barriers. I do think people do go on to grassy areas with their cars. So if that's possible, I see that as well. As far as basketball court, it would be fun up in a parking lot. That is very creative to get some unique areas or unique, groups of people coming to the park. So in the future, it would be a great development. I think you're right on target. I think as far as like say Lisbon or dog park ideas, rules might be a really good idea on that. Like if you bring a dog to the park, keep it on a 6-foot leash, but I don't. I didn't think very much about anything else as far as maybe signage for that and the other amenities. I just think you hit it right on target with the parking lot and the road down to the water. Access to the beach is great. I think I like the road all the way down. The new access is really great, moving it really close. But again, for this first phase, yeah, I think it was great. And we will have to work on as money comes in. And I do not know if we will get another millage passed or not. We cannot guarantee that. So let's work with what we have. And again, like I said, I've been here on this committee, and the more natural early on planning is great. Keep it as natural. And then in the future, let's add certain amenities as they are, you know, as people from the township continue to voice their opinion. But phase one, great job, Brian. Thanks.
Thanks, Deb. CJ, are you there?
Yes, I am.
I think you've been,
I want to thank Brian and his team for a great design. I really feel like you took our comments and implemented them from the last meeting and did a great job on doing that, drilling it down. I think you did a great job utilizing certain areas of the park with, you know, the wetlands, and you took into consideration environmental impacts of each of those areas. And I think you did a great job on that. Love the idea of moving the pickleball down to the middle of the park. I think that's a great place for it. The size of the court seemed to fit there, and it, you know, you being able to fit that in there, because before we really didn't have anything in that area besides just a shelter and a trail. So that was a great spot to put something in. I also noted the savings of 1.8 million from, or about 1.8 million from the previous $5 million figure that we got the last meeting, coming down to $3.2 million is much more accessible and scalable over time. So I'm very thankful of your taking the time to go through each item and find ways to save and cut costs on each item to get us down to a more realistic, feasible number. I share the same thoughts about the splash pad. Right now, I don't think it's necessary at this park at all because we have the lake, which is a main water feature. So, in my opinion, I think we could save the money and use it for other areas of the park. I think it's important that we have the vehicle control traffic barriers in place. And it sounds like most of the other park members are in agreement that we want to do that. That's something for sure in phase one that we want to do, just for the safety of everyone using the park. Because it's been like this for 20 years and people are just going to drive off road and go wherever they want if we don't stop them from doing that, because there's already trails and driving paths that they've already been using. One thing I wanted to ask Mr. Powell on is, I know in the past you mentioned that we might be able to work something together with the treasurer on getting some type of loan to get money up front for the park. So I want to ask him about that. And, you know, I'm thinking maybe for the benches, like what Liz was saying, how we need more benches. I'm fine with that. I agree. Maybe we could do something where, you know, a business in the community, like the Metro Parks has, donates, you know, a bench and we put their name on it or something like that, just to get more amenities down there to start with. And that's pretty much it. I'm really impressed by the design. I think you guys really did a great job on it. And like what Mr. Powell was saying before, maybe we could just, you know, cut some of the trails before, because they're already pretty much there, especially the big loop trail area. So maybe we could do that just in the meantime before we start doing paving or gravel or granite, whatever we decide to put down on it. So really the only question I have is for Mr. Powell regarding, you know, the treasurer and what his thoughts are on it. But great job on the presentation and everything you've been able to put in this park.
I think Treasurer Roman will have to speak for himself when it gets to our board.
If I could speak on that.
Yep, that would be a good idea.
Is that okay, Mary, if I just make a quick comment?
oh, yes, please.
It's my understanding that that's not going to happen. The township general fund doesn't have any money to loan to the parks fund. We're already stretched pretty tight with the civic center. So while that was a creative idea, there's just no money to loan at this point from anywhere.
All right, thank you, Justin, for clarifying that. I appreciate it. It helps us make a better decision tonight as to what we can spend.
And thank you, Justin and CJ. Just to elaborate on my comment, as board members, we really shouldn't be speaking for each other, you know, so.
I understand.
Okay, y'all all set, CJ?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Kathleen, are you there? Can't see anybody.
I am here. I'm here. Yes, thank you. Like the rest of my committee members, I think Brian, your Beckett and Rader has done a wonderful job. One thing that I noticed tonight that I maybe missed, but you're talking about a gate that would be locked at a certain point in time to prevent access to the lakes? Could you verify that, Brian?
If I could address that, there was some discussion at some point just from a safety concern and to try to discourage vandalism and nefarious activity at night, that the park would be gated at dusk and opened at dawn. So
Okay, the whole park.
the
Okay.
whole park, correct.
Okay, I like that idea. I think it would make the residents on Brundle Lake pretty happy about that, because I have had some concerns about after hours things going on. It's such a fun place to be, especially if you're a young person. So, Liz, I really appreciate your attention to detail and thinking outside the box, but I'm wondering how much more time we're going to spend adding these details. We're kind of up against the timeline here, and Beckett and Rader are spending more and more time and probably expense to add these amenities in. And I'm wondering if we can just get some kind of consensus on a plan to move forward with the grant proposal and hammer out, not that they're not important, but at this point, I don't know that it's critical that we spend a lot more meetings and a lot more time with Beckett and Rader redesigning the site. And maybe we could, agree that we'll work on some of these things down the road. But for now, I feel like we're spending an awful lot of time having extra meetings and things for things that we can consider and include later down the line, especially after we have some of the basic infrastructure in place to see, where these things that you suggest might best fit. That's all my comments. Thank you. Great job.
Okay, thank you. Andrea?
And, okay. Yeah, I agree with Rhonda, Marie, and Deb with some of their comments also. And I think as a Parks and Rec committee, we generally always on the same page. So thank you, ladies. CJ, 100% agree with the splash pad. We already have one at Indian Springs. I do realize it's a metro park versus a township park, so there's absolutely an entrance fee. But at the same time, I don't know how much the splash pad is used at Indian Springs. Marie, love the idea of the basketball court up front. I love the idea of going down Elizabeth Lake Road, seeing some pickup basketball, my favorite sport. And honestly, I could even see like some of the fire department, the police department dudes going out there and doing some, just joining the groups that are up there. That was brilliant. I agree with those. Rhonda or Debbie that said they hadn't thought of that. Seriously, that was brilliant. I love that, Marie. I like the changes also with the driveway, so we can we can combine it with another driveway with the township, so we can cut some costs there. And I love that all ages can use this parks. All people as I work in the mental health field, all disabilities can use this park. And as a reminder, just to everyone, we only have so much money, and this is just a master plan. We can't, throw all the money at the park now and not having to keep our current parks under control and maintain those. So, I mean, to me, we have just some thoughts, $200,000 to maintain a basic park. So that's it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you guys for your continued support.
Okay. We're going to have another opportunity to speak, but I would like to go back to the on the screen to the alternatives, to the the various things that could be phased in this. I'm even open to leaving it to the board on how much of a match could be available. I'm fine with any of these options, but I will take comments about if somebody. I don't know which one to choose. It depends on what kind of match money we could provide. If it's a trust fund grant, even if you go to 50%, that's only 600,000. So it seems like you might want to look at the land and water, and maybe the next grant, they might increase the trust fund money back up to 500,000. So I'd like to focus on this and get a motion to move forward to our joint meeting and then on to the board. We have 3 board members with us tonight. But I don't have a feeling without Mike Roman here and the supervisor what option we should land on. So.
Mary, I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Liz.
Okay, so if I may, thank you, CJ, I appreciate that. Just to address Kathleen, so the process is, it's kind of a now or never to hammer out those details. So the process is your board tonight will make a recommendation. We'll then come to our board and we actually will, in the overall picture, have a very small window to tweak or make changes in order to hit that April 1st grant. So the more detail we can, within reason, hammer out and talk about now and the honing in of costs and what this park will look like, it's actually really important to the process now is to get that in. And the dog park is certainly nothing new. It's something that I've been asking for the last 3 months. So I don't find that to be, a last minute detail. And I still have yet to see it be plugged in. So I'm not asking for a large dog park again. And I'm pretty sure Trustee Powell agrees with me in my thinking that it's very possible just to put in some dog amenities and fence in a smaller area. So those details are actually really important in the process. This is our time to talk. This is our time to work on perfecting this plan and to bring the best presentation forward by the time that it gets to our board. So this is exactly the time to do all those things. As far as the splash pad goes, Andrea, I agree it's a metro park. I think, Mary, and I'm just curious on your thoughts, are you envisioning a large splash park as big as Indian Springs? Or
Up top? No, that's not my favorite splash pad. It's just, maybe they were in the splash pad business before kind of that had been fleshed out in the market, but I'm thinking of something more of a fountain that has the jets come on out of the ground, and it's also a fountain and it's also a splash pad, maybe
something more like along the Detroit Riverwalk,
right,
something like
kind of GM there. So
okay,
that's
perfect.
attractive and urban, and kids can still play in it. Doesn't require any lifeguards or maintenance, and it's a focal point. I'm hoping. I'm every time I mention something up there, they're like, "Oh, I don't have room for that." And of course, it depends on the developer. But I'm still putting it out there, and I kind of agree that we're kind of close to the lake. I still don't object to it. I actually don't object to the dog runs and that sort of thing. In a couple places, where we can have places like that, I don't disagree with that. I would like to
Thank you for sharing with me your vision a little bit, because that's kind of what I envisioned, just kind of little pops-ups like that would be the Detroit River front there. Because I agree, we're close to the lakes. We don't need to spend a ton of money on a large splash pad. And the word fountain scares me because children can fall into a fountain. So I just wanted to you and I just be clear that I wanted to understand what you're trying to express.
Yeah, something to be a focal point for the center of that development up there, and also has a play value, also has a visual value. And
yeah, sure, families, this will be a draw for families. I agree.
We talked a little bit about maybe a farmer's market somewhere up there too, but of course that's a different project, but they're companion. So again, Justin, how close do we need to get on I just not confident on saying. I think it's a board decision what phase we go with.
I think it's a recommendation by the committee. My suggestion would be, I would love to do option A. I don't think that we can afford option A.
Every penny that we have.
So I would say that we're probably looking at option C.
Is that the $1 million one?
I believe that's 925 if Brian can go to it. I think that's what we can afford in a phase 1 application.
So that goes part of the way down, and then maybe the shelter and the play lot and the other parking lot, and that would all be like the next phase.
Right, that would be, yep. So that would be if anyone asked for my opinion, based on the money that we have, it would be option C in phase 1. And then, there was discussion about future amenities. This master plan is a living document. So if it is, the design concept is approved, it can be changed over time. So yeah, I think I had a discussion with a couple of the trustees today, and, you know, say we get phase 1 and phase 2 going, and we realize in 3 or 4 years, hey, we need to make some changes. We need to make a tweak to this plan, and we can add this or subtract that, and that's
Right.
okay. And we can do that. So, you know, my suggestion would be that this plan as designed incorporates a lot of what was discussed. It may not incorporate everything, maybe 25% of it's not there, but this isn't set in stone, but this gives us the framework to move forward now with the grant application. It's a great start. There's a lot of detail here. The cost has been reduced significantly to something that we can achieve. And I think getting people into the park, getting them down to the water is just going to make everyone more excited for what this could be. So once people are visiting the park, they see what it is, the area that's there. There will be more support for expanding it in the future. So
Right, Justin, and that's what we've talked about. It's really important to generate excitement, because with that excitement, then they will join in our excitement as well. This committee's excitement for the park, which is just a win-win. And I want to just also mention, whatever phase your committee decides to recommend tonight, just please know that this is a living, working draft document. It can be tweaked in the future, and our board might tweak it in the near future. And please don't be offended. It doesn't mean that we don't appreciate your work or think that, you know, if you say C and we go with B or vice versa. We are very appreciative of the work that you've put into this. And so please don't be offended if it gets tweaked, because it's very likely that it'll get tweaked in the future. That's
Yeah.
just
My
part of the
question
process.
for Mary was regarding, in the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned potentially doing like 2 applications for grant applications. So is that possible in 1 year to do 2
Yeah,
applications?
I mean, many people, the only thing of is to do $1 million in the trust fund program, you would be, and then the grant's only 300,000. You'd have to come up with 700,000, which we can't do.
Right, I
So
understand.
you'd have to go down to 600,000 and have do 600,000, or I would recommend going to the Land and Water Conservation Program that would involve the federal government. Lately, things are really slow because of the transition and then everything that's going on up there. So those grants are kind of slow, but so are the trust fund as far as when you can do something.
Because we're really relying, a lot on your expertise here for the grant application. I know Beckett and Rader has their own grant department and everything, but us as a board, like, I'm relying a lot on you for your knowledge and expertise.
Well, I'm trying to come up with $1 million, and the biggest grant is in Land and Water.
Yeah, so we're kind of like
Also,
relying
less
on what your
competition.
thoughts are. So I wanted to hear your opinion as to like
Yeah.
which type we'd go for and what you're thinking
I'm
before we make.
optimistic that the next time we come back for another phase or another project, that they'll go up to 500,000, but that's their board decision. So that, who knows? But it's still the trust fund is very competitive. Land and Water is less competitive because most communities don't want to come up with the 50% match, which, we may be able to.
Okay.
I would like to come back with the 900, this project, this option C, if the board decides to go with a higher cost. Of course, that's actually wonderful, but that would be, their decision based on the township budget and such. Hopefully we can get our, we want to be able to get our millage passed again. It seemed like it was just yesterday. And I also like the idea of the capital campaign. None of the grants will pay for the development of an amphitheater at the top. They would pay for the parking lot, but not the amphitheater. And so a capital campaign for that aspect, much like what Melford did. And then like CJ, the bench donations, not just businesses, but donations of memorial benches or other smaller things that people may be able to dedicate to a family member or such. So anyway, I don't know if anybody.
Yeah, I do quickly.
Make a motion on C or.
Can I say a couple things first,
Yes,
Marie?
please.
Just very quickly, again, all of you guys had some great ideas, and Trustee Smith certainly and I have talked, and as things can be tweaked, it's my understanding that what we show on this and what we represent in the application has to be built. That doesn't mean that somewhere down the line amenities can't be added as the township wants to. That being said, I've got a couple things that I might point out. Beckett Raider, Brian, you have bollards all the way down both sides of the road. You can eliminate a great deal of those bollards when topography and or the rain gardens, the ditch line along the right-hand side or the south side of the road. Nobody's going to drive their car down into a rain garden. So you can cut out maybe a third of the bollards that you have shown in there. Not only does the township have the potential, and this is a debate for our board for finding some funds, but keep in mind, and this is something that the committee doesn't know, but may not know, as we're promoting the Civic Center site, we are looking to partner with a private sector developer. Private sector developers are very philanthropic, and I could obviously see them coming up in future phases with some hard funds to be able to assist in the growth of this in order to help them promote what they're doing with the township over on the Civic Center site. So that's definitely a possibility. CJ, your idea of benches, excellent one. But I also noticed, and again, it's a small little tweak, small little detail, because it doesn't matter. But if I'm down there at the lake, I didn't see any benches along the shoreline back at the tree line, but along there, as I'm sitting there taking in all of this lake front and what's going on, it'd be nice to just sit there and watch the activities on the lake. And so that may be a problem, or maybe nice to add. Liz, you're concerned about the basketball in the parking lot? Done all the time. And we can even delineate where cars are to park during the day, and unless there's special events, and they can easily separate the area that is used for basketball and parking. And I might tell Brian, you have a basketball hoop on one side. There's no reason not to put the basketball hoop on the other side too, so they can have a short half-court basketball game and a pickup game instead of just shooting at one basket. So think about that at the southwest corner of that parking lot. One last item, and we all have to remember, and I'm going to remind Trustee Smith as well. It's going to be 10 years before we even get close to increasing the numbers of residential units down in the Civic Center site. So if the quote dog amenities or some of these amenities aren't there, you're not going to have any residents at all in the Civic Center for probably 4 to 5 years. And so certainly the first phase will not be serving any residents in the Civic Center. So we have to think about that timing. And as we talked about it, this park will morph as the Civic Center morphs as well. And we'll have a great deal of opportunity to revisit some things. So thank you, Marie.
So, Trustee Powell, if I will, I'm not, I hope I didn't express myself wrong. I'm not overly concerned about where the basketball court is.
Oh.
I'm just so gosh darn pleased there is one. I
Yeah,
really
no,
had
it's
to fight
awesome.
hard last week just to get one at all. So
No, and we're good.
is that there's one there at all. I mean, I asked for quite a few changes and amenities last week, and almost all of them are incorporated. So I'm not overly concerned. Just was a thought to
Yep.
move it, but I had temporarily forgot about the slope there. So thank you. And as far as, the dog park just for the Civic Center residents, you and I have talked about this. Our own community will still be bringing their dogs to this park. It's not just to serve residential area in the civic center. So my thought on it is plug it in now so that it's there and a possibility, because irregardless, people are going to bring their dogs to this park. So we're just trying to provide a safe spot or guidelines for them to do it where it's not increasing or risking liability for the township. So I actually think it's really smart to build in right now some kind of dog amenity. And I think it'll get a great draw and attraction to the park. I just want to throw something out there, just brainstorming with you all. I know we're all talking about option C right now. And then Mary first started out saying, gosh, I don't know which one to pick. They're all so nice. And how do we make a recommendation here? What would you feel if we chose A instead and you allowed our board to tweak and chop and see where we can draw funds from or not? Just curious of your thoughts on that.
I just.
You're the Parks and Rec. We're the volunteer team. I'm almost kind of offended, Liz, by your comment. We're the recommending board.
Right. So you're
let us do it. We're Parks and Rec.
I understand, but what if you recommended A and let our board see if there's funding to draw from anywhere else?
I agree with Andrea.
It was made clear that we don't have any extra funds. And thank you, Justin, for your comments.
It's not meant to be offended, Andrew. It's just meant to roll around ideas.
Yeah, I mean, but to me, it's quite clear, Liz, not to be rude, that we only have so much money to spend.
We do. I agree. We only have so much money to spend.
Yeah.
But
we're Parks and Rec. I mean,
is A okay? A's on my screen right now, right?
My question is, I'm understanding the word tweaking, but I'm not sure when you mean tweak the plan. I understand you can get money from different areas, like say for park benches, but
right.
I'm not sure if you mean tweaking like putting in fences for a dog fence or your so that's what I'm trying to understand when you say tweak, and how much will that involve? Because on this list here, there is no money for if it's at $2,000 or $20,000, are you suggesting a tweak for?
I'm talking about minor tweaks because the money is realistic. So I'm talking about minor tweaks. They wouldn't be large tweaks because the reality is money, of course. So I'm just talking about our board might look at this and say small things like, well, benches are really important, or a splash pad can be held off, like just for example, because that's what's in front of my screen right now, option A. It's on here and it's not listed as future. So I'm talking about small tweaks because that is all there'll be time for. There won't be time for changing much on whatever this committee recommends.
Right, but again, they're unnamed tweaks, and that's not what I'm comfortable with.
I have a question for Justin.
Oh, okay, but just know that our board, and I mean no offense to it, but the process allows for our board to make tweaks when it comes to our board level.
Okay, Brenda.
So then why have a recommending board, Liz? Not to be, because I'm not trying to be offensive, but that's kind of how I'm taking it as the liaison. Like, why have this volunteer committee then have me as the liaison just say, nope, whatever you guys said, you're the recommending board. Let's not do it. Sorry, Liz.
I agree.
I'm not trying to be offensive.
I agree.
Okay, and I'm just trying to explain process. This board's recommendation may come to our township board and there may be no changes, but it's not offensive. It can't be taken personal or be offensive if our township board does make changes.
Well, we do have a joint meeting next time. I think we can make a recommendation this time and be conservative and then still show them this whole presentation next time. I also want to mention that we definitely want to come up with $1 million to maximize the grant. And then when you go ahead and do your contract drawings and even do your bid, and this happens all the time, the project comes in high or you decide the budget looks a little better, you can always say, you can put some alternatives in the bid, or you can say, if it comes in reasonable, we can add these things. And if sometimes you even add scope, what will end up with this grant will end up with a list of scope. If
Mhm.
you have more money later, the quantity of scope is not determined. So it'll just be bench. It won't be 6 benches.
Right.
Even though you start with that. If you end up putting 1 bench or 10 benches, that meets that scope item. So
And where they go is flexible. So,
Right.
entirely,
um,
yeah,
Mhm.
unfortunately, everything can be, you have your list of scope and you have your grant dollars. And basically, you know, we would be asking if you change this plan a lot, but it's still not the plan until, you know, you go to construction and you build it.
Right. And due to time constraints, there just isn't the time to change this plan a lot. And that's one of the reasons we're having the joint meeting before this proposal is officially presented to our township board in our February monthly meeting, is
That's
to
right.
talk again.
So, I mean, I still think the million is good. And then if the board wants to do something else, we'll have the joint meeting the next time and bring some other people to the table, although we do have 3 of you here. So, I mean, I think it's important to move forward with one of these with C, in my opinion, or something that might even, you know, get close to $1 million, just rounding it up. And
One thing I do want to mention is what Mr. Powell was speaking about with the vehicle
Oh, yeah.
barriers up at the
Right.
top. If
Totally.
he, like you were saying, if we could remove 1/3 of those, we're on option C right now at 924. Obviously, it would be under 900, I'm sure,
Right.
you know, based on the fact of removing some of the costs for the barriers.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to throw that out there and make sure everyone's aware, you know, if
Right.
we take some out, the price is going to go down on either, I guess we're talking A or C at this point, because, you know, those are the ones that have the barriers in them. So
Yeah.
Mhm. Right.
I have a
Okay.
question for Justin.
Yes.
Justin, when you said you felt that C was attainable with money and the grants and what we would be able to do, did that also take into consideration completing that triangle pathway?
so it's a stretch at that point, and we're going to pursue other grant funding for the Triangle Trail, and then this, option C assumes some more millage collection before we actually, like Mary said, start spending money. So I think option C is, just budget wise where we're at, unless there's some magical windfall of funds that come to us. But I would suggest that, we've had a pretty robust discussion tonight. I think we're at a point where people are ready to make a motion for a recommendation on an option. And then just process wise, the joint meeting on February 10th will include the whole township board. At that time, they will be approving the design. It won't be going to the regular township board meeting in February. So this is the recommendation for the design and the phase 1 grant application that will be approved by the township board in some form on the 10th. And then, in March at the township board meeting, they'll have the public hearing on the grant application and pass the resolution in support to move forward with that. So that's the timeline. So I don't know if anyone is ready to offer a motion.
well, before we do, I just wanted to bring up one last thing. What Mr. Powell was saying earlier, how the developer of the Civic Center may at some point want to help us develop the park with more amenities to market the Civic Center. My opinion tonight, we're just trying to get people to the water, and we're trying to get, people interested in the park. So if we went with option C, then they would have, down the road, the option to go with option A and expand further down towards the lake with the parking lot. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Sure. So I think that's, a given that we can always build on it. And then if a developer is, as some public benefit of that other project, contributes to a future phase, then, that's just better for us.
Brian, do you have any capability on your screen to put the phases next to each other to compare the line items at all?
believe the only thing different is just the down to the lake pathway. I think that's the only
It's
the
And the
difference.
length of the park.
option A essentially adds this stretch of roadway down off loop. That's the only difference.
And what's the cost for option A? Is 1.1.
1.2
About
essentially,
one
yeah.
about 1.2.
0.2, and another one was 924.
Yeah, 925 rounding. And
So, but
if I might mention, just, thinking ahead for a phase 2, if the board's or if the committee's recommendation is for C, this sets us up really nicely for phase 2 in that, thinking about grant scoring for a future trust fund grant is would
That whole area.
complete the roadway down to the drop-off loop, and then start adding in some amenities in the core of the park here. So that, I think that sets up for a really nice future grant, phase 2 grant. And then option A, where we would complete this down to the drop-off loop now, that also sets us up for a nice phase 2 future grant in that we'll be able to complete that much more of the core area, and then also maybe start thinking about pickleball courts up in this area as part of a phase 2.
And really what we're looking at is 276,000 is the difference between A and C, just so everyone understands. To make the pathway all the way down, that's what it's going to cost. So in my opinion, I like option C because I like having more flexibility to do grants for the Triangle Trail, which is what we promised the voters when we did the millage. That's just my personal opinion, but I just want everyone to be understanding that the difference is 276,000 for the fully expanded path.
thank
So.
you, CJ. I appreciate that. Brian,
Willing to
can you
take a
go back?
motion if anyone's
second?
willing to accept my my offer.
Or did you?
Well, Andrew, I still have a question. Brian, when you went back to option C and you had your red handy dandy pointer there. So it's in brown on my screen. So that to me, unless I'm sorry, I apologize. I can't read like the shoot offs. They're just too small on my screen. It's labeled that that does not allow for handicap accessibility or senior citizens to be dropped off closer, option C, correct?
Option C.
It makes no access to the drop off point.
Option C, the road would end at this point, and there's a parking bay here with accessible parking contained within it. So the non-motorized distance to the lake shore is further in option.
Is considerably further, and
Than it
it
is in
does not allow
option A.
for handicap or disabled to get to the lake. Correct?
Well, it allows for it, but it's a long roll. I mean, there's parks that people, it's a longer route
Yeah.
on a temporary.
All of
I'd like to
the
wrap up.
trail system would be designed to be accessible. So
Right.
all fall within ADA guidelines and universal accessibility guidelines. But you are correct in that the non-motorized distance between parking and the lake shore is different.
During that.
I mean, I
Right,
think we'd
so-
all be in favor of option A if there was no budget issue, but the difference is, what can we afford? How much can we get in a grant? Where are we going to maximize our money? And where are we going to be able to continue the Triangle Trail and, expand for the future? So I think everyone's in favor of, getting as much as we can done. It's just a matter of the money that we have to spend to do that and how much we're going to get back in a grant.
So
Agree, CJ. Everybody's in favor of Triangle Trail. So Brian, is there an option that you can think of that would allow us to get handicap accessibility drop off to that circle? And we could shave as close as we can to that 276 off of something else in option A in order to get accessibility to the lake. So we would stick with option C. Well, we'd make a hybrid here. So we'd extend to the handicap accessibility circle? And is there something that we can exchange in cost and take away as 276 or as close as we can,
Yeah,
just 276?
Sure. Forgive me, I'm doing math in my head as we speak, which is
Nope,
always,
you're doing a
which
great
is
job.
always dangerous. I think we could probably get somewhere close to 1 million if we brought the roadway down to the drop-off loop, had a path from the drop-off loop to the overlook pier,
Mhm.
and then eliminated all other pedestrian facilities in the park.
Oh, I would have a hard time with that. but I
That's a
would-
hard one. Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind extending the road down. I just want to say, from a grant strategy, there's no benefit to making the application bigger than $1 million.
Mhm.
And there's no additional scope items that would be in the application if we are able to extend the drive and the drop off and some paved accessible parking later. I mean, you could still submit the first C, and that would include all the types of scope that we would need, whether we just did C or whether we extended it and we're able to do the drop off in our final plans. But that gives us more time to look at the money and, you know, if we're able to do it, or if there was a donation from a developer, or sometimes there's a contractor that comes in and extends that. And so there would be no additional scope because we'll have roadway, we'll have parking, we'll have accessible parking, and we'll have walks. All those things would be in the application, whether we are able to do A or C. That wouldn't change. There's no benefit to going above 50%. So in fact, the grant, land and water grant has to be 50%. So,
But there's a huge benefit to getting
oh yeah, I just,
our residents
all the
in
way
this
down.
drop-off area.
Yeah.
And we have a large senior population in White Lake.
So maybe,
I
yeah.
hope, I'm trying to find a way to get to
Yep.
that drop-off area and, you know, and shave costs somewhere else so that we can
Get all the way down.
mostly go with, mostly go with C and see if there's something else we can do to balance it out.
Just get the
Um,
drive all the way down.
Andrea, were you gonna say something? I thought you were gonna say something. and
Yeah,
you-
no, I'm willing to make some form of a motion with some support, like with the verbiage, to make the motion to accept phase 1, option C, with an adjustment to include the drop-off cost of option C, with that being our recommendation to the board.
I would support that.
Andrea, can you clarify that your end part where you mean the drop off?
Well, that's just what I'm calling it, with an adjustment to include the drop-off of the area by the lake, by the water.
The
That
circle
helps you.
drop off?
Yeah.
And
So
extend the
C
drive all the way.
and okay. And
Well, before we make 100% on this, when we go back to option C and we look at 924 was the cost estimate, and like I said before, 924, Mr. Powell had mentioned removing some of the vehicle barriers up at the top where we have natural barriers. So obviously that
Right.
would be lower. Now Mary's saying that
Yep.
we need to be closer to 1 million and not go over the million, but obviously we'll still be under by about 100,000. So what we're trying to do, I guess, is we have 276,000 difference between A and C. And if we shave off some of the costs, then we're saving, we have
Mhm.
about $100,000 buffer here before we hit the $1 million mark. So what we're trying to do is how can we spend $100,000 to try and maximize and get down to the water for handicap accessible, I guess is what we're trying to look at.
so if I'm following thank you, CJ. So if I'm following your math, I think we have a $200 difference. We are at the 924. I'm just ballparking that and adding the 276 in it, which is the difference to get down to the handicap parking. So we want to hit under 1 million or close to it. So somehow we need to shave off, correct me if my math is incorrect, no problem. We need to shave off about 200,000 off
Yeah.
of Plan C, correct? So I forgive me, but I'm not seeing the ballards as an item listed, CJ. You referenced it. That
Oh, no, it's in this bid because when you look at option B and D, that's with them removed. So this bid includes them all the way down, like what Mr. Powell was saying, down the whole path.
So what's a good, trustee
Yeah.
Powell or Brian, what's a good estimate if we took away some of those? What would be the cost saving?
Mike
Okay,
referred to about
if
a
I
third,
may-
so.
Go ahead, Brian.
If I may clarify, we have included bollards for vehicular control on options A and C where they are needed. They are not, we have not planned for them to fully line both sides of the roadway. There are currently, as we have shown, breaks where the roadway is adjacent to woods or adjacent to parking where we might have concrete curbs. So we have broken those bollards where we feel it's where we feel it's appropriate. So we may be able to delete a few bollards here and there, but I probably wouldn't count on that as a large cost savings.
Okay.
Marie?
Just
Yes.
can I make a point of order? We do follow Robert's rules of order here. So when a motion is made and supported, there shouldn't be any more discussion on it.
Justin, that's not correct. After a motion and support, there's always discussion regarding the motion. So let me just add something here because I quite frankly really like Andrea's motion because for two reasons. Number one, and I look for maybe Brian to go back and look at some things. I've got the topographic survey of the site. Brian and Beckett Rader did an excellent job stating that in steep areas and in marginal areas, really he's proposing paving. But in looking at the topo, that paving on the east end of the roadway can be cut way back almost to the structure there. It's virtually flat all the way through that area. And then if you propose not paving all the way down, including the circle, but just paving the handicap spots down there, I'll bet you that you can trade the paving that's shown here and extend all the way down to the cul-de-sac with gravel. And that gets us access down there.
I really like Mr. Powell's idea.
There
I
you
think
go.
that's something that we could definitely do, and we can always pave later
Yes.
over top. And that's,
There's
gets
always
everyone
room
down
for
here. And
compromise.
So Andrea's motion, that, and then keep in mind that Beckett Rader has done a great job in coming up with these costs. They've been conservative. When we actually bid this thing out, the township board might be able to do even more depending on how the bids come in. So we're talking a year from now, a year and a half from now.
Yep.
And so Andrea's motion makes a ton of sense in my opinion.
Okay, I can't see everybody. So I want to make sure that there's any other comments or on this motion.
Andrea, can you restate your motion so we're clear? So it would be, my understanding is it's C, adding,
Make the motion to accept phase one, option C. Let me get the right verbiage correct, and they make an adjustment to include the drop-off cost of option C. And that can be cleaned up, but that's the gist of it.
I mean, the drop off cost of option A, you mean?
The drop-off of for the drop-off cost for the water.
Yeah.
so
Okay.
my math puts that at 1,200,000, yeah, 1,200,000. So like, yep,
So if, yeah, the close, please round it up. Even if you don't get down to the $1 level, round it up to $1 million so we can ask for the full 500,000.
mhm.
Deb or Kathleen, CJ?
Maybe we could do, I mean, if we have to get up to the million exactly, we can for sure do option A and then just say that we'll remove, like what Mr. Powell said, we're gonna go with option A, but then change the cost to have it not be paved in areas that are not needed. And that would probably bring it down too. I'm in support of Andrew's motion, but I'm just bringing that, if we have to have $1 million for sure to,
Well, it just seems prudent, and I think we might as well go for, there's no benefit to asking for less when we know we're gonna be putting up pretty much 500,000. Is that,
At the moment, A and C are becoming one and the same.
yep, so get it down to $1 million. So I don't know
you
what to
just do
call it.
phase 1A, not to exceed, $1 million with,
Yeah,
change of paving.
right.
So
Something
that's
like
what I
that.
proposed in a few minutes ago, was that maybe we proposed A and then worked on it a little bit in our
Yeah.
next joint meeting.
Right. Justin, does that work, or do we need Andrea to restate her? Go up from C or
Whatever
down?
you guys
from-
want to do.
I'm willing to adjust. Yeah, not with the recommendation of not to exceed $1 million. Just add that
Okay.
to the verbiage. I know I'm not the best motion maker, but
Justin.
You
can
did
fix it.
great.
thank
Mhm.
you.
And I'll
Okay.
support that.
I definitely support.
Kathleen says supports for CJ. Thank you. All right, I'd like to do a roll call vote. Justin, you want to help us with that?
Sure. Deb Darren,
I support.
Rhonda Grubb,
Yes.
CJ Brada,
Support.
Kathleen Asseltine,
Yes,
Mary Carlock,
Yes.
Andrea Voorhees,
Yes.
Mike Powell,
Yes.
Liz Smith.
Yes.
Woohoo! We can celebrate.
Good job, everybody.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Thanks, Mary, for all your knowledge and helping us through it.
You bet, Mary.
yes, Mary.
Great.
It's gonna be a great
Absolutely.
park, and I'm confident that generations from now will appreciate the park. So now I can't pull up, I guess, because the presentation's up there. I can't pull my agenda up. There it is. And it says other business, which I don't think we have any other business. But we are able to make member comments. So is there any interest in more comments? We've done 2 wonderful meetings. Yes, Kathleen?
Can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
Yes, no, I
Okay.
can hear you.
This doesn't have to be discussed anytime soon, but just kind of a thought I'd like to put out there. I would like to see when we can start up. I know it depends on, vaccination and things, but when we can start maybe using this space, or maybe having some concerts as a municipality, we can get the Oakland County band shell for free, I understand. And I might be premature. I don't know if there's electricity out there. Or maybe if we could do something in Holly Park. We were about to schedule a concert there when this all happened a year ago. So I'm anxious to get some activities going, and I would really be anxious if we could start using Stanley Park in some capacity. So I don't know if that's possible, but I'm just tossing it out there. We are ready to get out there and dance.
Well, that's wonderful.
I think that's a good idea. In the spring and nicer weather, have that band shell do something and have those drawings out there for the residents to be able to see what the high hopes are and what the tiny steps will be to get there.
And even if we just do a spring wildflower walk or something, just like we did kind of before this all started, people it's not accessible, but at least people can get to the park and not feel like they're walking down there all by themselves, and feel like they're with a group in the spring.
And we do have a good local herbalist who actually lives right down the street, and I've taken many of his courses, Jim McDonald. He'd be a perfect person to lead some kind of nature walk maybe in the spring, to identify some of our local plants and some of our local medicinal plants. So yeah,
We will count on you to make contact with him, and we're all optimistic that we can
All
get
right.
out of the pandemic soon this year. Or any other comments before?
Yeah, I just want to do a quick one. I want to remind everyone that February 10th is our joint meeting. Parks or the Township Entire Board will be joining us.
Yeah.
Virtually again on the 10th at 7 p.m. And I'm going to brag, I am getting vaccinated on Friday. So I'm very excited.
How did you get an appointment?
Good for
Yeah.
you.
Yep. Thank you. I'm all set.
I'm jealous. I want to go.
Thank you.
we're all better.
I'm jealous of others, but super excited.
Wonderful.
I never talked to anybody that was excited about getting a shot before, but okay.
I'm not a big fan, but what I can do to help us all out,
Yep,
I'm all about it.
you bet.
One thing
Okay.
I wanted to mention, just want to thank again Brian and his team did an excellent job on getting our concerns addressed. I think that was great. And, you know, as far as the splash pad in the future, maybe, you know, Mary's comments on that, want something more like the Riverwalk in Detroit, you know, maybe something up by the library, if they have room on their property in the Civic Center development, maybe something like that can happen in the
That would be
future.
nice. I mean, and I'd still, you know,
Yeah.
I'll throw some of these ideas, you know, to Sean and the supervisor, but, you know, I know Mr. Ruggles was thinking about where can we have a regular market where, you know, we can buy vegetables and, you know, the heart of our community, which we haven't had before. So any other
I'm
comments?
really looking forward to everything. So
That's
it's
great.
great ideas from everybody.
Well, you know, I wasn't confident we would be unanimous tonight, so thank you all for giving and taking. And Liz, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I just wanted to really thank Brian and Justin for relaying our messages to Brian, and Brian doing such a wonderful job of quickly turning it around and back to us and giving us not only one option but three. And so I really appreciated that. So thank you, Brian. I know we gave you a puzzle last time we met. So you did a great job, and I'm impressed that we had 3 options. I want to thank you all for your input. Thank you for working with us. I think that this is going to work out great, and it's been a pleasure. You'll see Trustee Powell and I one more time on the 10th, and then you guys can be back to business as usual.
Well, hopefully, you know, we can move on to construction someday. So
Right.
yeah, I want to thank
It's very exciting.
Brian and everyone from Beckett Raiders, one of the top landscape architecture firms in the state.
Yes,
And
they
I
are.
know we were a bit like herding cats, so thank you for your quiet and deliberate actions to listen to all of us. With that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Rhonda. Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Carrie and Justin, thank you for also tracking us. And Ken.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks,
Sherry.
everyone.
Night,
Have a good
everybody.
evening.